전담에 나와 지가 나와 대직시 상황대로 수로서 민지기 치 대체 다시는 뭐 받죠 봐라 용수 공면 나봐서 민지기 나봐지니까 수로서 민지기 오고 한 들을 깨서 태워봐라 갈라 저는 미샤 민지기 쭉 와 꿈이지 민지기 오고 저도 내비다니 관계 나보다 민지 태워발래. 아마도 수로서 민지 오고 수지 민지 수장장을 수장장을 남나 장만을 보는 수지 민지 오고 나보다 샤마데라 수지 민지 오고 저도 매파 다 저도 매파. 제가 다 땅마디 지금 다 이 수로서 민지 오고 수지 민지 오고 직문진 제거로 뭐다 수지 민지 오고 땅문진 제거도 다 바로 다 봐 답대버 신소나 수를 세서 수 시비다 죽시 이마지 알아. 다 다시 그 잠을 내는 야가야. 그 잠을 내는 야가야. 어때지? 다시마 될라 수지 민지 좀 없었다. 수 뭐만 거나래. 수 뭐만 인주 수 뭐만 거나 샤. 수 뭐만 샤고. 샤고를 떠다 수 뭐만 때주 제용 가게에 두고 때주세나 다시면 놀라 가야 가고 싶지. 알피지 수.
나서 수 뭐만 인세리 담버리와 유 담버리와.
예, 수 뭐만해요.
나 뭐만 요만해.
다요 말아봐. 말아도 다디. 수로서 민지에서 수지 민지에서 민담심마도 오늘 뭐만 수.
나서.
다 뭐하잖아. 전담대만 많이 가면 고소하. 전담도 매시라 고소하. 수 뭐만 지면 전담도 유스 나보.
나서.
어제 수 뭐만 지래야 수지 민지에서 납작다.
나서.
하고 수지 민지에서는 어느 거 가르쳐 버리고 샤나 가르쳐 버리고 문진 가르쳐 버려서 다 패지 니면으로 삼는 말하는 수시를 가지고 주시인 봤다. 같이 이름이 지어라.
나서.
이름이 지어라. 다고 된지 하나도 가지고 때는 된지 아버지다 된지 뭐만 되겠네.
나서.
어다 될라 바지 되이 맞아. 어때? 나서. 딩체는 다 되는데.
나서. Okay, don't forget we're talking about two states of mind. Pick up from where we were this morning. We're talking about two states of mind posited in the mind-only school. And we were concentrating on the differences between the objects of these two states of mind. One had a certain object, one had another object. How were the two objects characterized? The object of the first state of mind was described as something which doesn't exist ultimately and does exist nominally or deceptively. Something which doesn't exist substantially and something which does exist merely labeled. Okay, that was the description of the first object, the object of the first state of mind. Then we had a second state of mind which was described as, its object was described as something which is substantial, something which is not just labeled, something which is does exist ultimately, something which does not simply exist as a labeled thing. Okay, that was the way those two objects were described with those two states of mind. Now Geshe-la wants to go into the actual wording for those two objects. Those two objects are not simply called, something you can see. Right, that's only part of the name for those objects. In each case, we have a little bit of extended phrasing in the Tibetan. The first one is called something you can see, comma, that thing which has the name of something you can see. Okay, something you can see, comma, that thing which has the name of something you can see. Geshe-la was thinking about this one. He was trying to imagine what the mind-only school is talking about when they talk about something you can see, comma, something which is just given the name something you can see. Okay? And he was thinking about it, he said, I think they're referring since they say that they are referring to something which is not substantial, but rather something only labeled, they must be talking here about the fact that visual objects are what you call visual objects. Okay? The fact that visual objects are what are called, quote, visual objects, is actually what we're talking about here. We're talking about a state of mind which is concentrating on the fact that visual objects are what are called visual objects, which is in itself a construct, a mental construct. Okay, so the object in the first case, because of that additional phrasing in the Tibetan, that thing which is given the name of visual object, etc., it must be talking about the very fact that this thing is what we call a, quote, visual object. So that's the object in the case of the first consciousness. The object being something which is not substantial, which is only a construct, something which does not exist ultimately, but rather exists only nominally. What is the object in the second case, therefore? Geshe-la points out that we have some extra wording here also. We are 6 lines from the bottom, and it says, it adds the expression Ngopa Juda Meva. Juda Meva means cannot be called. Okay? So here we have the object of the second state of mind is being called that thing which cannot be called simply something we call visual object. Okay? That thing which is beyond description as something we simply call visual object. Meaning, now we're talking about the real blue. Suk nibadi ngombo rang no. Suk nibadi. Nasa. Ming tam mayinke. Judume. Ming tam du judume. Nasa. And now he'll go into the meaning of the object of the second one. So he's finished the first one. He wants to point out that in the description of the second object, they've used the same phrasing with a small difference, 4 extra syllables, okay? Instead of saying that thing which is just called a visual object, now it says that thing which cannot be described as being just called a visual object, okay? And now he's going to go into more detail on what that means. If you take these words on face value, if you take these descriptions of the two objects, of these two states of mind on face value, there seems to be a big problem here. It seems to be, we can't conceptualize it very well. It's kind of hard to think about, and there's a doubt that could come into your mind whether this or not is something that the Mind-Only School wants to say. Okay, so is it something the Mind-Only School wants to say? And even if it is, it's kind of difficult to grasp. So he wants to talk more about it. Let's take an example. Now let's look around. Let's see. What are we going to take as an example? Let's pick on this thermos bottle. Okay. So let's pick on this thermos bottle. Now don't forget that in the description of the object of the second state of mind, right, the second consciousness, this thermos bottle, or there's being described a thermos bottle which is beyond description. A thermos bottle which cannot be spoken of. Okay. And so in the Mind-Only School, it says, first of all, in the Mind-Only School, they're saying the thermos bottle that I'm pointing to is not the thermos bottle that the Mind-Only School is talking about when they say the thermos bottle which is beyond description. Okay? Now what do they mean? That's still we're going to clarify. But what Geshe-la means to say is, if you're like walking around talking to normal people who have not studied Buddhist philosophy, they did not get into what the Mind-Only School means, just plain old guys, and you go up to them and say, hey, you know what? This thermos bottle is beyond description, Or if you come up to them and say, by the way, this is not the thermos bottle which is beyond description, okay? Then sounds like crazy talk. So I mean, you got to clarify what they mean when they say this is or this isn't a thermos bottle which is beyond description. When the Mind-Only School says about this particular thermos bottle that we're pointing to right now, that this is not the thermos bottle which we can describe as indescribable, right? As beyond description. What do they mean when they say that? Where is the thermos bottle which is indescribable, okay? It is inseparable from the consciousness which is perceiving it, okay? There's a consciousness which is perceiving the thermos bottle, and there is a thermos bottle which is beyond description, And that thermos bottle, which is beyond description, has an inseparable relationship with the eye consciousness, the visual consciousness, which is perceiving that thermos bottle. Okay. So they would say that in the mind-only school, right? In the mind-only school only, right? In the mind-only school, this is not the real thermos bottle in a sense, okay? This is not the real thermos bottle that you're seeing when you're perceiving a thermos bottle. What you're really seeing is something which has an inseparable relationship with the visual consciousness, okay? So in the mind-only school, they talk about a thermos bottle which is not out there, okay? Which is not down there on the ground, but one which is bears or enjoys an inseparable relationship with the eye consciousness, with the visual consciousness. So you have to get familiar with that idea that in the mind-only school they're talking about a kind of thermos bottle that exists with that kind of relationship with the visual consciousness. So where is the thermos bottle that can't be described, right? Where does it lie? Where is it located? Okay? There is the collection of parts that we call the thermos bottle. And in the mind-only school, they say that that thermos bottle which cannot be described does exist within those parts. Okay? It does exist within that collection of parts. Why do we say that that particular thermos bottle is indescribable? It cannot easily be described accurately by people who have not yet seen emptiness directly. So assuming that we were people who had not yet reached the level of a person who's seen emptiness directly, and we look at that thermos bottle, there is an indescribable to us, which we cannot describe, thermos bottle there somewhere in its parts, according to the mind-only school. But there is something, when you look down at the ground and you see this thing there, okay, this big chunk of thing, you see this hunk of thing there, you look away, you look down, and you see this hunk of a thing there, right? You do see something, right? So what are you actually seeing according to mind-only school? You are seeing an appearance. You are seeing something within your own mind, something appearing in your own mind. And you are focusing on that apparent object, okay, that appearance of something. And you are thinking that that is a thermos bottle. And that's actually the object as described for the first state of consciousness. Okay, so what you think is the thermos bottle when you open your eyes and you look at that hunk of thing there, that blob there, and you say, and your mind says thermos bottle, what you're actually focusing on is a he doesn't want to quite call it mental image, okay, but he wants to say you're focusing on the appearance in your mind of a thermos bottle, and that happens to be the object of the first state of consciousness, as it was described, something insubstantial, something labeled only, something that didn't exist ultimately, okay?
What is this? 어느 데는 말하고 똑똑나야 돼 가르쳐 주나 않잖아. 말하고 빌라 치료 전도 자담고 치료 전도 줘봐 생긴지 로로히 중하러. 그 또기 중에 근데 박자디 뒤 박자지 상. 그 또기나 셈지 남자 담시 샤를. 그거라 자담 시를 다 주시 이마서 다 거셔. 말하고는 나도 치고. 다 자담 시를 다 주시 이바고 뭐가 갈 때야 말아봤어. 전담도 메서 가고 라디오 주시기 뭐 이거 다 알아들어 가있나 나중에 그 락바지도 와 어디 나중에 다 락바고 다 같이 다 대부분 누가 다 대부분다는 거 말이야. 자나 뭐 많이 쓰지. 라라라라. 거기 사람들은 짤리고 말. 그다음에 무슨 무시하죠? 됐어요. 니 치료 통도 그봐 짐로 징하라 이거지 그 박자 샤도 또 괜히 치료 통도 거라 치료를 또 이거 장하라도 나오자 받지 차 제가 이 사람은 뭐만 많이 쓰고 다 제가 그 똑같잖아 사람 거라는 뭐만 샤샤고 그냥 내가 가르쳐는 저도 내가 차
generally speaking, there is a real thermos bottle there in the collection of the parts of the thermos bottle. That particular thermos bottle for us is beyond description. At our level, we cannot describe it properly. But then there's another thing that appears to us. Because of our habit of seeing the thermos bottle and other objects as existing external to ourselves, okay? Remember that was in this school a kind of mistaken impression that you can get. Our habit of thinking of that blob out there as existing external to ourselves plants certain seeds, mental seeds within our mind, and those seeds make us see something which is called, Geshe-la wants to call it, the fact or the appearance that the thermos is what is called the thermos. Okay? The appearance that the thermos is what is receiving the name thermos. Okay? The idea or the concept that the thermos is what's getting the name thermos is actually what we're seeing. And we are not seeing the thermos. We're not seeing the real thermos. In this school, if somebody comes up to you and says, "Are you perceiving the real thermos?" you have to say no. And so, well, what are you perceiving? And you're perceiving a thermos in the idea that the thermos is the thing called the thermos. Okay? So that's how you perceive the thermos. You're perceiving some kind of concept of the thermos rather than the thermos. And that's the way it is for us normal people who haven't seen emptiness directly yet. There is a real thermos out there based on the collection of the parts of the thermos in this mind-only school, but you're never seeing it. You're always seeing a concept of the thermos. And that is the object of the first state of mind described on page 54. So, to put it simply, in the mind-only school, given the mind-only school, we'd have to say that there are two thermoses in effect here. Okay, there are two thermoses. There's the thermos which can appear to us, okay, at our level, and that's the idea of the thermos, really. Okay, so in this school, that's the thermos that we are seeing. When you look at a thermos bottle, you can look at this blob, and you think you see a thermos. What you are really seeing is your concept of the thermos. That's one of the thermoses that is there. Then there's a second thermos there, which does not appear to you, which truly is existing there in the collection of parts of the thermos. So really, in the mind-only school, you'd have to say there are two thermoses going on here. There's the one that you think you see, and then there's the one that's there, at this level, at our level.
치바 입이 나서 내가 야 니에 세르고 통해야지 치베 나서 제샤 삼네 치베 나서 소소로 이어받기 문제 제도나 그게 나오면 시다래야 말해서 다 치베 나서 이어받 관식 찍라 하나를 미코는 뭐지 싸워니 치마도 내가 때라 하고 쇼를 가르쳐 줬어
세브레스
있나야 시험 먹고 세브레 그래 통해 쇼고 된다고 거 연이 거는 학과나 가르쳐도 그래 통해 쇼 세브 그 많이 게 쇼가를 보고 막 신샤고 요사고는 뭐래 가리는데 이래가는 거 아니야 그래 나네 아니요 그 나는 요약하고 그러나는 집에 나서 이거 여바 관심 그래 뭔지 제목
나네
내가 세브 찍으라랑 독삼이랑 이렇게 거는 까부시고 알아 아니 그네 강고 띵도 그랑에 나와 따르기 세브 찍당 무비네들 이제 까부시 샤고
Generally speaking, Geshe-la wanted to go off into the effect of certain diseases on your perception, okay? Mistakes of perception that are caused by certain other influences. And in Tibetan medicine, there are three basic elements that determine your health. The balance of these three elements. One is called wind, one is called bile, and one is called phlegm. And these three humors in Tibetan medicine are responsible, the balance of them or the imbalance of them is responsible for your health. It's said that in the case of a disease where you have too much of the wind humor or too much of the wind element, that you begin seeing white things as blue. And he said, does Western science say that? I said, no. And he said, well, let's go on to another one. Which one do they accept? I said, well, they accept the thing about bile, okay? So he said, oh, let's go to that one, okay? So in Tibetan scripture, it says that if the humor of bile becomes overly predominant in your body, then you begin to get like a jaundice condition. You know, your eyes turn yellow, the whites of your eyes turn yellow, hepatitis or jaundice, and then actually your perceptions start to change. So if you take a person who's got a really strong case of jaundice or a hepatitis, they start to see pure white colors like a sheet of white paper. They start to see it tinted yellow slightly because of the predominance of bile element in their body. Okay, so Geshe-la says, you know, let's take that example. Let's take an example of a person like that. The actual piece of paper is white. What they think they're seeing, or the paper as it appears to them, is yellow. Okay, and there's two kinds of people that you could divide. You could say there'd be one kind of person who had a bad case of jaundice and knew that it was affecting their perceptions, and you could say there was another person who had a bad case of jaundice and wasn't aware that it was affecting their perceptions. So the guy who wasn't aware would swear that rectangle was yellow, right? He said that's yellow. You know, he would not recognize the fact that it's appearing one way and there's another piece of paper out there that's white that he cannot see right now. Okay, but if you take a person who knows he's got jaundice, a bad case of jaundice, and he knows the effect of a bad case of jaundice on him, he knows that there's a rectangle which is appearing to him as yellow, and he knows behind that there's another rectangle which is actually white, and so he's sensitive to the fact that there's an apparent object and there's another object behind it. So really there's two objects going, there's two pieces of paper going on, right? One yellow, appearing yellow, and one which is white. Same thing with a thermos bottle, okay? There's a thermos bottle going on, and there's the appearance of a thermos bottle going on, and in the mind-only school, you're focusing on the appearance of the thermos bottle and not on the thermos bottle, okay? Generally speaking, you know, you might hear my example and say, come on, Geshe-la, that's different, you know. This guy's really sick, and he thinks he's seeing something yellow, but there's really no yellow there. And yeah, I can admit there's no yellow there, but we have to admit there is the appearance of yellow there, don't we? Okay? So, I mean, you can't say there's no object appearing yellow to him, or there's no appearance of yellowness to him. There is an appearance of yellowness to him. You know, does the piece of paper have yellowness from its own side? No. But it is appearing to him as yellow. So we have to admit that there is an object appearing yellow. There's an appearance of yellowness, and there's the object which is not yellow. So there really are two objects going on here, and you have to agree to that. Okay, that they both do exist. A yellow appearance does exist, and a white piece of paper does exist.
Mana ku ta sho de tungyo amare sho long chu ku amare sena sho se po ko long chu bare sena mare si ku long chu mo ma ku sho kar po ko
That's all.
아주 거기 키티 찍긴 시부딩 니가 냠벌이 좀 그렇잖아. 그럼 야 그냥 거다 쇼세부터 통화 말해. 쇼세부터 쇼 말해 나와라.
네.
말했어. 오늘 되게 쇼카부터 통화 말했잖아. 전화 가고 있는 거다 통화를 있나야. 그 쇼세부터 쇼 마인자 뒤쇼 세부 통식 말했어. 그냥 거다 카르보랑 통데. 있나야. 저랑 통해 쇼티 세부 말해 까버렸어. 남나 그래 삼류 나 세부 코라나 대샤만도 까 같이 남네. 까버려 프로그램지. 아 삼류.
And Geshe-la's other example for something which is white, which I forgot to translate, and in Tibetan in general, is yogurt. Okay, yogurt is like always given as the example of a white thing. Okay, so I said, suppose some guy's got this bad jaundice, right? This bad hepatitis attack, and he's got a cup of yogurt that he's looking at, and he'll see it as yellow, right? He'll see some kind of, there'll be an appearance of yellowness to him, and there'll be some yogurt there which is white, right? And then if you come and ask me, well, when he eats the yogurt, is he eating white yogurt or yellow yogurt? Okay, and the answer is, of course, he's eating white yogurt. Okay, what does he think he's eating? Okay, I mean, if you go up to him and say, "Are you eating white yogurt or yellow yogurt?" He'll say, "I'm eating yellow yogurt." Okay, but in reality, what he's eating is white yogurt. Okay, so he doesn't recognize the fact that what he's eating is white yogurt, and in fact, he is eating white yogurt. But if you ask him what he's eating, he'll say yellow yogurt. It's a very similar case.
What? That's it. 디팅도 강한따라죠 고랑이 남자이 쇼세포 찍당 뭐비 내세지 용어마 찍당 가르포지 니찬 거로 대단 더버지 나랑도 타게 자담을 때용도 나랑도 타게 라바라 찍찍난 거로 이랑도 따르지 자담 찍당 뭐비 내서로 다 죄도 매비 자담지 니차 딱고때 빼잖아 사실 두고 해나 매놨다
맞아. And it's the same case with the thermos bottle, okay? We got, with the yogurt, we got a white yogurt which is sitting there in the bowl, and we got a yellow yogurt which is appearing to the guy, right? The appearance of a yellow yogurt, right? And the thermos is just the same. We have a thermos bottle as it is appearing to us, okay? And then we have the real thermos bottle behind it, okay? We have which is what's described as indescribable to us, okay? I mean, we can't grasp it right now, okay? There's this rough image or appearance of a thermos bottle to us, and then there's this more subtle thing which we can't see right now, okay, which is to us, to a normal person, beyond description, meaning we can't talk about it because we don't understand it. There's a thermos bottle out there existing in the parts of the thermos bottle, the collection of the parts of the thermos bottle, and then there's this much rougher image of a thermos bottle, which is what we normally see. And it's a very similar example of these two thermos bottles and these two yogurts. Okay.
What is this? What is it? That is something na lokala ko. That is something na lokala. That di keche tu ta ngato sangi mali ki mar sham magai wa ta. Sham magai wa. Keche tu kia sham deli ga ta ko ni samal tu shikshan ti sham ade phain.
You know, in actuality, we want this question of, two levels of thermos bottle or something like that is discussed in great detail later on in the text, okay? We're not going to make it there, okay? So Geshe-la says on this class, okay, in this series of classes. So he says, I think it's very important that I talk about it. It is going to be a central point later for the MindOnly school. They're going to have to be talking about this subject. We're not going to make it this time. So I thought it'd be nice if I gave you a little précis, a little preview of what we're going to be talking about when we get to that.
탄주에서 나도라 뭐 테라라 자담 레스타체 자치하면 탄주 룰라 엄마 탄주 룰라 나라도 욕다다니 가면 이 계제들은 욕다다니 가면 나라도 자담라 바데 통할 오 테라라 자담 세르만도 이 띵량 나라도 쇼무도 저도메 자담세 쇼마마 타가래 제가 뒤치로 된 탄주 타가라 맞습니다 타가라 당연히 내가 대충 거야 이거 아시 단단한 가서 샘담을 시작하시는 게 또 싸우듯이
in the consequence group of the middle way school, right? You can say that rough thermos bottle that appears to you is the thermos bottle, okay? And that's all there is. You don't have to talk about some phantom thermos bottle behind the thermos bottle that is beyond our description or beyond our ability to perceive it or something like that. In the middle way school, things are much simpler, The rough image of the thermos bottle as you see it is the thermos bottle, okay? And there is no other thermos bottle laying behind it that's the real one, that's beyond your ability to describe or to perceive, okay? In the middle way school, Prasangika, things are a lot easier. Rapidi. Yes. Do you remember?
Oh, you remember it? You remember it? That we did in the maybe some Jara. What are these here but chicken? Watching. Nothing. I don't have a
I forgot to translate one more thing about the middle way school. And therefore they can say that it's an outer object. Okay? And therefore they can say, simply they can say, you know, the rough one that appears to you is the thermos bottle, and that's why you can describe it as an external object. Okay, sorry. Now he says, by the way, when we were talking before about a version of the thermos bottle that was indivisibly related to the perception of the thermos bottle, the visual perception of the thermos bottle, which one do you think we were talking about? The rough one that you think you see there, or the subtle indescribable one? He says the subtle one, okay, and the indescribable one, okay. It's that one which they would say is indivisibly related to the perception of the thermos bottle. Let me check it and make sure. He says that jude mepe da rakpa se di nga nangcha la yeken ki jadon di miki na shepe da ngo chi mainke tak pa ye
ko te jondom de meke tak pa ne
la
chadam shi bi ra ju bi ju shi yin ba ko
tak pa wa tak pa wa ni
ngo ba da tak pa ni na ko tak pe na
아니 가르치 자동 주드 메버디
jude bi chadam ko da tak ngo ma chadam ma
뭐 보나
아니 뭐
주드 메버디 미기 나 셔버던 거 지임바 따버든 거 미기 셔 미기
jude me mo chadam
나서 뭐 보디
jude me bi chadam jiwa ro ta ko ngi che to ma ga ra do sem dam lu shi ga ra de di ta khane la ba ma
나서 뭐 보디
o da ko ngo ko che ni chadam mi chi ko da mo chi na ko da re ma ge 전담도 이렇게
나서
나라도 나도 좋아
나네
그리고 다 가봐도 그랬잖아 딱배 감
나서
당연히지 나는 딱배 감지
군다이
오다 군다 죽나 다 군다
나서 oh boy okay this is a clarification the rough one which is appearing to you the rough image of the thermos bottle is not, as I said correctly, okay, got it right, is not the one which is indivisibly related to your visual perception, okay? That one, the rough one, the image one, is among the categories of changing things and unchanging things. It's in the category of unchanging things. It's in the category of constructs, okay? And it could never have been indivisibly related to your, it is not indivisibly related to your visual consciousness. It's the other one, the one which is beyond description, the one which is a changing thing or a functional thing, the thermos bottle itself in a sense, which is the one which according to the mind-only school is indivisibly related to your visual consciousness. Okay? That's all.
다 거는 다 나도 나도라 뭐 군다 가는 샤사
네.
원나 때 가서 똑배 된지 세지 와라
네.
된지 때고 된지래서 된지가 말했어 니
네.
된지 세지도 미시라 나사요
나서
똑바지가 고 맨나야 누구 롱바데 봐 맨나야 코도 상단지 똑바지도 된데
나서
된대지 차차로 니 미시로 그러다 다 급하게 지금 락바지라 거는 미시로 나 된지래야
나서
똑바지 된지서 나한테 제가 카드로 때는 된지 잡았지
라라라
이나 뛰고 된지래 차지죠 된지다 군인이라 차라리 개발해
된지 라그레베
된지도 그게 정말 된 떠아니는 면에 딱 그래서 미 지지 와라 지야 말아
라라라
그래서 나도 사자를 때나 가서 되는데 이거 돼 나라서 똑반데
라라라
이거 돼 예바 지요
나서
이거 빠가라 그거랑 빠가라 이거 바지라 나 시에바
라라라
제가 보니까 타라
디 라그레싱 요 타게 나서
나서 뒤다 깔래가
나서
세미나를 lap뒤다 깔래가
나서 okay. This is interesting, okay? You know, we've talked about dunchis before, mental images of things, okay? And he says, are we talking when we talk about the rough appearance of the thermos bottle to us, are we talking about a dunchi? Are we talking about a mental image? He says, it sounds like a mental image, doesn't it? You know, the description of it is very similar to the general description of a mental image, but they are different things. Okay, don't forget here, we are dealing with a sense perception. Okay, we are dealing with a visual perception of a thermos bottle. And the thing between us and the thermos bottle, this unchanging construct of the rough appearance of the thermos bottle to us, right, is relatively, he says, subtle to describe. You know, you don't like go around looking at thermos bottles and suddenly catching yourself, I was looking at this construct, you know what I mean? So relatively speaking, it's kind of hard to catch. It's more subtle than what we call a mental image. Mental images, he says, do not relate to sense perceptions. When we talk about a mental image, we're talking about an image of the mind, or an image of the imagination. So what would be an example of an image of the imagination? These are mental, right? These are not related to sense perceptions, okay? So for example, there used to be 4 guys here in class who have taken off for other countries already, okay? But we can look at the spots where they were, and we can imagine what they used to look like when they were sitting here, right? You say, oh, Winston was here, you know, Winston looked like that, you know? And you can get some kind of a mental image of Winston in your mind. That's relatively more gross, less subtle than this image, okay? So the image that's related to sense perceptions is relatively subtle, difficult to catch yourself doing it, right? Difficult to catch yourself perceiving it as the image. And then you have this other thing which is actually in a sense grosser, and you can easily catch yourself doing it. You say, you know, if I say, where's Winston? And you look over there, and in your mind you have this mental picture of Winston, you know, and you're thinking, oh, he's not here. You compare your mental picture to the empty space there, and you say, oh, he's not here, you know. That's relatively much more gross. Okay, listen again. When I start talking about the real thermos bottle, I don't want you guys to get confused, you know. Don't go around telling people in America, oh, Geshe Rinchen says, and the MindOnly school says there's no real thermos bottles, and don't go around and get a reputation as Buddhists who say that things that are that aren't, and things that do exist don't exist, or something like that. That's not what the MindOnly school is saying. When we talk about real thermos bottle or something like that, we're just trying to describe how you perceive the thermos bottle. We're not like accusing thermos bottles of not existing or anything like that. So when we got down to the second state of mental state, right? State of mind, and we were describing its object, and we added that extra phrase. What was the extra phrase? Indescribable or beyond description. Now I've just been trying to clarify the meaning of that for you, because that is a big difference between this object and the object that came before. Here we got this expression which is beyond description, and now I hope you can distinguish between the two objects. That's all. Don't forget that we were referring to the object of the first state of mind as being something that existed in labels, right? and that didn't exist substantially. And then we were talking about the second state of mind, and we said about it, it does exist substantially, and it doesn't exist merely as labels, okay? And now Jetson Kappa is, kindly going to draw a distinction before us between what it means to exist through labels and what it means to exist substantially. So on the fourth line from the bottom on page 54, he begins his discussion of the difference between the two by giving you the two right there. Zetak meaning zeya, dantagya meaning substantial, and just something exists through labels. Okay, that discussion by Jetson Kappa, description of it, is going to go up to page 55, line 3. And to make his presentation, he's going to be quoting from the abbreviation of Arya Sangha. Okay, from that text itself. I gave you a brief description yesterday of the difference between something existing substantially and existing merely through labels. And what we said was, when there's an object which has a nature that in order to perceive that object, you must first perceive some other objects. There must be some kind of prerequisite perceptions happen prior to perceiving that particular object. When you must perceive other parts of it, for example, before you perceive that particular object, before you can perceive that particular object, we call that object an object which exists only in labels. An object, a labeled object, or an object that exists in labels. And then when we talk about an object which you can perceive all by itself, in one moment, right? You just see it and that's it. Okay, you don't have to perceive some other things before you can perceive it. Then that kind of object we call existing substantially. That's called an object which exists substantially. So, as I told you yesterday, if we wanted to give an example of something that existed through labels, through that process of having to have one perception in order to have the perception of that object, we could posit a person. Didn't I say that yesterday? Right? Got it? Is it written down in your notes there? Okay, gotta say something. Now, what's an example of something that exists substantially according to this school's version, right, of what it means to exist substantially? What is something that you don't have to have other perceptions in order to perceive it, right? We can take mental things themselves, okay? States of mind. You don't have to go through some gradual process of perceiving the parts of it or some other things before you can perceive it. You just perceive them right away. When you think of thoughts, they're there. You don't have to have perceptions of parts or something like that or any other perceptions prior to it. You just, all at once, you can have a thought. Okay? You can perceive states of mind that way. A perfect example of this, remember that this school accepts a state of mind called apperception, which is the awareness of your own perceptions, okay? The simultaneous awareness of your own perceptions. While you are seeing something, you are aware that you're seeing something at the same moment, which is not accepted by some, other schools, but that's a long story. So that would be an example. What is the object in this case? It's a visual perception, perceiving blue, right? And what is the subject in this case? It's apperception, or the ability of the mind to know itself simultaneously. It's the awareness of seeing the blue. And when seeing the blue, when you're aware of seeing blue, it's not like first you have to go check in with some other objects, you know. Oh, I better go first check this and check this and check this. I have to perceive this first and then this and this and this. It's not like that. When you are aware that you are perceiving blue, it's just one big awareness all at once, okay? You're just immediately aware that you are seeing blue. Okay, so your self-awareness that you are seeing blue, that blue which that self-awareness is aware of is an example of something that exists substantially. Okay, because to perceive that you don't have to have a separate checking process or prerequisites or anything like that. You are perceiving blue, for example, and then your awareness that you're perceiving blue just happens, and there are no stages involved or anything like that. That's a sign that that state of mind called visual consciousness of blue is itself something which in this school exists substantially.
So you're saying that the blueness is not what we talk about.
Not at all. Right, not at all. It's the state of mind. Remember we said mental things can be described as existing substantially. Yeah. Yeah.
탄이지 왕기샤 마샤바 랑기 세니지 주바니자 우데라 민갈 세즈 탄이지 왕기 마샤바세 또베 따바자 마이비 랑기 세니 주바그래 고고 우데라 민갈 세 아디 오툭세 탄 민갈 송과데 가르쳐야 버려 그래서 탄주를 좀 딱딱 알아서 따유 이 친지라 탄이지 왕기샤 마샤바 랑기 세니 주바세 싸니 슈주 나네 아마 저 강가로 따유 장자래서 쌤들 가서 탄주에 말하기 뭐 가서 저 강가로 따유 장자를 내려 따니 다 이제 다 간다 쌤들 로라 최시에 송하나 뭐 되고 강사한테 따유 샤송아 강사고 강사 지점 따유 샤송아 되게 따유고 되게 따유 샤야 강사고 따유 장이 유랑기 들루 중간에 두 랑기 텐지 주봐야 이니까 랍초게 라레 단주로 됐다 찍라면 좀 아와 인자 아니 루디라 갈리기
나서 line 5 page 55 there's a description there, a literal description of what it is to exist through labels, okay, which is called Tagyu in Tibetan, right? And it says here that thing which is not such that to perceive it you need not depend on other things. The double negative, okay? Then it says comma, that thing which those things which to perceive them you must depend on perceiving other things first. Well, that's what we mean to be existing in labels. And those are things that we say exist nominally, and I'm sorry, those are things that don't just exist nominally, okay? That's what it says here, which exist through, and which exist by definition, okay? Makes sense? Kazak, person. Yeah.
They exist by definition.
Things which, hang on. That tayo yimbache. Taneki wangi masha pe yimbache. Tope tatsa mayimba.
대단도 딱 돼요. 이래다. 센터에 로라 따요 당 랑기 생기 주바니 뭐지 망가.
Gyawamanes. That's all. We'll take a shortcut, he says, okay? Forget the wording of the text, okay? The point here is that the Mind-Only school is saying that something can exist by labels and yet still exist by definition. Okay? That's the big point here. Something can exist through labels, exist nominally, I think it says here, okay? I'm sorry, not just exist label. We'll talk about that. But can exist by definition. Now in the Madhyamika school, in the middle way school, it's totally the opposite, right? It says everything exists through labels, okay? Nothing exists substantially, okay? And so to exist to exist, and they would say that existing through labels and existing by definition could never be true of the same object at the same time. These are contradictory qualities. You couldn't say that something was just a creation of your projections or existing through labels, and at the same time say it existed by definition. In the middle way school, these two qualities are totally opposites. They could one thing could never be both. Okay, but in this school, interestingly, they're saying these things, like a person, exist through labels, and simultaneously they exist by definition. Okay, and for them that's no problem. In their school it's no problem. Okay. Kansate kundana ves? No. No way. No way. It exists. It exists. He says you are confusing existing in labels with constructs. You're confusing ta ye with kun tak. Okay, you're confusing tak ye, which means exist through labels, with kun tak, which means construct. Okay, the kere kare ta ye dan kun dan ye ke condition. Don't forget what makes the thing ta ye. Don't forget what makes the thing. Don't forget what is required of a thing for us to call it existing through labels. All it means is that in order to perceive it, you must perceive other things first. And don't forget, that's all that existing through labels means. It's a code word for those objects in the world which to perceive, we must as a prerequisite perceive something else first. So did you get existing through labels down right? Got it down? Yeah. And the idea of construct is easy, okay? We talked about it many times. Something which does not exist from its own side through some unique way of being of its own, but rather is just a projection or just a creation of our mind, a construct of our mind. And then Geshe-la himself slipped between the two words, so no problem, okay? Ta ye and kun tak, different things, okay? Yeah.
Ta ye yena rangi tini ki yende khabaka.
Kab guna bes. Ta ye yena rangi tini ki. We didn't say that if you were one, you were necessarily the other. All we said was that in the mind-only school, these are not contradictory qualities, meaning you can find at least one thing in the world which is both. Okay? Which is what? What both? Which exists as a label thing, meaning that to perceive it, you must perceive other things first, and which exists by definition. So although in this school they would posit an example of that there does exist such a thing which has both, which is both, and therefore those two qualities are not contradictory, we're not necessarily saying in this school that to be one is to automatically be the other, or that all of ones are all the other. We okay here? We okay here? Did we make the division? Okay. All right. So to summarize, in the mind-only school, you can be something which is existing through labels and still be something which exists by definition. In the middle way school, once you are something that exists through labels, forget it. You could never be something that existed by definition. The mind-only, the consequence group of the middle way school says, hey, everything that exists in the universe exists as something labeled. Okay? Nothing. What?
다 그래서 타니기 안 마셔봤어요. 또배 따봐 마셔봐. 또배 따봐 좀 많이.
Okay, that's where I stumbled before, okay, because I was looking at the book and he says, now let's get to the book because the book has some extra stuff that we got to clear up, you know. Okay, the book says, by the way, Geshe-la notes that Jetsun Kaba is raising these issues to clarify our thinking about what it means to exist in labels and to clarify our thinking about what it means to exist by definition by saying that in the mind-only school, these two qualities are not contradictory. One thing can have both qualities. And there he's trying to help us understand what those two terms mean in the mind-only school. And then the mind-only school throws in one more thing. The mind-only school says, we have no problem with one object being simultaneously A, an object that exists through labels, okay, and B, an object which exists by definition, meaning it is not simply a projection. It is not simply a construct of the mind. So they throw in that extra phrase there to describe what it is to exist by definition. So to repeat it, Minority School says we don't have a problem with one thing existing through labels, yet still existing through definition, meaning for us something which is not simply a nominal thing, something which is not simply a product of our imagination or a construct of our mind. In the text, it's line 6 on page 55, Tanya Yuwangi Mashakbar, meaning not simply established by projection or by imagination, but rather something that exists by definition.
다 민간나 민간에서 랍도 니 샤네 본인이 가리고 말해 진짜 본인이가 이거 샤바
once you've come along, especially in the Buddhist debate, right, and said, hey, this quality is not contradictory to that quality, meaning there is at least one thing in the world which has both qualities, you better be ready to show what that thing is, right? kunshi nangi bakcha singyore ne.
kunshi 보다 간제 양 시바 야가들 또는 그 누가 그 띵도 샤샤 나고 데이터 슬랍도 되버나
나네 데이터 나서 나서 데이터네. The book only says, you know, somebody says, give me an example of one, you know, show me one thing that is both exists through labels and still exists by definition, right? And then the book says a mental seed of the foundation consciousness, kunshi bakcha, okay, a mental seed of the storehouse consciousness, okay. And then I was trying to clarify with Geshe-la because this kind of words can be very greasy, you know, slippery. So I said, does it mean mental seed in the storehouse consciousness? Because all it says here is mental seed of the storehouse consciousness, right? Which can be read as storehouse consciousness mental seed or something like that. And he says, you know what, to make it easy, forget the genitive here. And let's say the mental seed which exists in the storehouse consciousness, or on atop in English, or in is okay in English, okay? In Tibetan, Tengdu, okay? That mental seed which has been planted, how's that? In the storehouse consciousness. That is one object which is simultaneously something labeled and something which exists by definition, according to the mind-only school. What do you think of first? Well, first you're like focusing on, let me see, let me look, it's like saying, oh, the cup is on the table. So first you got to go around and locate the table, right? And then you locate the table, and then you can locate the cup, right? So somebody says the mental seed which is in the foundation consciousness. First you go looking for foundation consciousness, and then you go looking around in it, and you find and say, hey, there's a mental seed in the foundation consciousness. Now what has happened just now? You have had to focus on another object in order to get to the mental seed, right? First, a prerequisite perception, right? First you had to go looking for what foundation consciousness was, and first you thought about foundation consciousness, and then you went looking for the thing that was in the foundation consciousness, and then you found the thing that was in the foundation consciousness. That's a sign that that mental seed is an object existing through labels. Because that's what existing through labels means, right? Okay. Listen again. No, sir. We're just trying to stick, by the way, to the wording of the book here. We could have posited our own chichen, our own example, right? What would that have been? Person. Okay. Why? What's a person? Oh, person exists only through labels. Because you have to perceive other things first to perceive that person, and it doesn't exist by definition in this school. Does exist by definition. Does, yeah, exist by definition. That would have been an example we could have pulled out. We didn't pull out that example just because the book didn't pull out that example. The book pulled out the example of mental seed in the storehouse consciousness, in the foundation consciousness. Listen. Geshe-la says to our school teacher, which is Chris, okay? He says, by the way, the rule of this class is that, you might as well let you know, is if you feel like you gotta go to the bathroom or any kind of uncomfortable, the bathroom's right there behind the electricity, and just relax. He says, let your hair down, spread out if you have to spread out. He wants you to be comfortable because that's the rules of his class, and since this is your first day, he wants you to be comfortable. So, if you get the urge, then feel free to go and, be comfortable and spread out and just relax. That's the rules of Geshe-la's class, okay? You can be one of those people that goes to the bathroom and never comes back to the class, or you can be one of those people that goes to the bathroom and does come back to the class. Either way. Want to just check in with you and remind you that the expression existing through labels, tag yu, has no less than 4 different meanings in the mind-only school, okay? So just to warn you, okay, that the expression existing through labels has 4 distinct meanings in the mind-only school alone, and it has other ones elsewhere, okay? And he says, when we talked about that first state of mind before, remember? The first state of mind on page 54, and we said that its object existed only through labels. That dagya, that existing through labels means exists only as a projection or a construct of the mind. Okay, that dagya means something else. Okay, that existing through labels in the mind-only school has a completely different connotation, meaning existing only as a construct of the mind or a projection of the mind. Okay. And then when we get to this dagya, down here on page 55, when we're talking about that one, we're talking about something which, in order to perceive it, you must first perceive other things, okay? Those are 2 different meanings of that expression, existing through labels, so far. Okay. Did you think of some question in your mind just now?
Just when you said about it before, I was just checking it's the rough water flow. Yeah.
Oh, let me check. That tayo dambo say number shape of dambo digi yudik jopi tayo say the 그렇지. 자동 노마들의 자동 라바 샤워들의 나서
저도 매비 자동고 차야.
나서 나서
한한도 대보라 메두스 김상 더블링 그 로당보다 메두께서 대보라 코드와 코레스.
나서 the one that's described as let me get this straight. The indescribable one, right? Is substantial, exists substantially. And the rough one that you think you see, the rough appearance of a thermos bottle, that is the one that's being described as existing by labels alone. And hey, by the way, isn't the question you just had in your mind evidence that it's difficult for us to describe it? You see, we describe it as indescribable or difficult to describe. So, hey, there's proof of it. He had a question about it. Okay, that's okay. Jesus, that Judah member said he called Jukapocher once. Yeah, this indescribable was hard for you to describe, wasn't it? Don't forget that we are restricting ourselves when we talk about indescribable to the mind-only school. It's only the mind-only school that starts to talk about this, phantom, indescribable thermos bottle that you have to think about. In the middle way school, what? Hey, the appearance of the thermos bottle is the thermos bottle, okay? I mean, that rough apparent thermos bottle is the thermos bottle, okay? But in this school, there's this thermos bottle behind the thermos bottle that we can't really find easily and like that. Okay?
야 따위 찍레비온데 따위 싸바질레니 가르는 민다 또배 따비 따위 시대도 코다 랑게 제니 주반님은 베티간도 차
나서 don't forget that when we talk about two meanings of the expression tayo, meaning existing through labels, right? We just had a statement in the book that said, hey, in the mind-only school, one object can be both existing through labels and existing by definition. There's no problem. These two qualities are not contradictory, right? But if you describe the meaning of existing through labels the first way, which is just a projection of the mind or just a construct of the mind, hey, then that and existing by definition are totally contradictory. Okay, so be careful here. Be careful to divide them here. Okay, the first existing through labels in the first meaning and existing by definition in the mind-only school are totally at odds, totally contradictory. Existing through labels and existing by definition in the second sense of the first one's meaning, those two things are not contradictory. So don't get confused here.
타지다 따유 뭐만 한지 말해. 이나야 따유 민라오 삼잖아. 메팔라야. 때나 pompa pompa 가지고 주시를 랑게 텐지 주요 말. 주고 따유 시에 납초 말해. 매 신도 콜라 아니 로지기 로록시지 좋다니 요아래. 요아르지 따와인다. 따와인다 그나 따유 뭐마다 잘. 나 따유 식레는 거 그래서
When you say this thing tayo, when you say something that exists through a labeling process or something like that, right? If you think about it, just from the wording of it, something that exists through a labeling process or something like that, you could maybe even come up with things that didn't exist that could be described as something that was there through a labeling process, right? So although it's not a real thing that exists through a labeling process, you could think of it in terms as looking to exist through a labeling process. What's an example of that? The fact that any particular object is what is called that particular object, right? Does that fact exist by definition or not in the mind-only school? It does not exist by definition. Now pretend that it did exist by definition, okay? Pretend that there existed a fact that a thing is called itself that existed by definition, right? That would be something you'd have to make up with your mind because it doesn't really exist, okay? And in that sense, that also is an object of labels. In a certain sense, you could say that non-existent object, which happens to be what emptiness is empty of in this school, okay? That exists by labels also. So although it is not what we classically call those things which exist through labels, you could describe it as existing through a label, although it's not an existing thing, okay? I mean, in a certain sense, you could say, oh, that is a construct of my imagination, okay? That is something my mind is making up. And in that sense, you could say it exists through labels.
Is that the thing that emptiness is
Yeah, that's the gakcha. That's the gakcha. In this school, the fact that the fact that something is what it's called doesn't exist by definition is what, if that did exist by definition, it would be what emptiness is empty of. Okay. Nothing.
What?
Don't forget that the principle existing by labels that we're talking about is the one which means in order to perceive that object you must first, as a prerequisite, have other perceptions of other things first. Okay, and that's the main meaning of existing by through labels. But on the other hand, even though that's the main meaning of existing by through labels, don't think that all the words, all the things that are described as existing through labels all mean the same thing. Don't think that every time they use the word, the phrase, existing through labels, they're making this big mishmash or Irish stew of all these. Don't go try to make all those phrases mean the same thing, because they are not going to, and they don't. Okay, although that's the main meaning, there are many other flavors of meaning to this phrase, and don't make the mistake of thinking that they all have to be the same or they're all going to be the same, because they're not. Okay. Then let me see, 3, 6, 9 lines from the bottom, page 55. Jetsu Kappa makes another statement though, right? He says, although that particular tagyo, right, the one where you have to perceive something else first to perceive that thing, right, that particular flavor of a thing that exists through labels and the quality of existing by definition are not contradictory. One thing can be both. But, okay, here's the but. Line 9 to the bottom, it says, meaning, if you're talking about existing through labels in the sense of being something that's just constructed by the mind, or something that's just a projection of the mind, well, then that is completely contradictory to existing by definition. Okay? That version of tagya, that flavor of tagya, that connotation of the phrase existing through labels is completely contradictory to existing through definition in this school. Okay? It's okay? Problem? No? Okay. Now we finally reached where we were last night, after a whole day, okay? Line 7 from the bottom, page 55, Josu Nipa means the second way of explaining what that means. What means? What it is to exist ultimately, and what it means to exist deceptively. Okay? Okay, then we finally got back to that part. Okay, now after all that, we are back to where we started out from, which is the second way of interpreting what it is to exist ultimately and what it is to exist deceptively. Remember, there was the first version of what it is to exist ultimately, and then the second version of what it is to exist ultimately, and then there was the first version of what it is to exist deceptively, and then there was the second version of what it is to exist deceptively. We finished these two. We still got to get to these two. Okay. And I taught you all that last night. I'm sure you remember.
코 또는 야야야야 간에 좀 용용용시 양대 토가 지금 뭐 바사 가라더니 하나로 되는 남을 다 간다 돈이 또 남지요 다 삼무시와로 콜라 두바 테나 담바 민다나 도시야
Nasa. Nasa. Now we're the second way of explaining the terms or the phrases to exist ultimately or to exist deceptively. For that, we're going to go to Maitreya's book called Distinguishing the Middle from the Extremes. Okay, distinguishing the difference between the middle and the extremes. Madhyanta Vibhanga. Okay, so in that book it says we can describe ultimate. First, going to talk about what it means when we say existing ultimately. What the ultimate part explains when we say existing ultimately. And then it says there are three kinds of ultimate. There's the ultimate object, there's the ultimate attainment, and there's the ultimate practice. Okay, so ultimate has three different meanings. What is the ultimate object? And in Tibetan this is almost a pun because then you have to say dun dun dampa. Okay, meaning the object of ultimate object, or something like that. The word ultimate incorporates that word also. So it sounds kind of cool in Tibetan. Dun dun damba means the ultimate object. That's emptiness itself. Okay, ultimate reality. Okay, what is the ultimate attainment? This is in this present context. We're talking about nirvana, reaching the state of a foe destroyer, or reaching nirvana is the ultimate attainment. Okay, and then it says ultimate practice, meaning what is the ultimate practice? It is the perception of emptiness. Okay, it's the practice of perceiving emptiness. Okay, so you've got ultimate object being emptiness, ultimate goal being enemy destroyer or nirvana, and then the ultimate practice, which is perceiving emptiness. Okay, we have three meanings of the word ultimate here. It says Madhyanta Vibhanga. Okay, no.
What is this? That thing was long the time. 다 전담 디 값이 전담 세하고 전담 뭐하고 갈라셔서 코스 숨기 나네 방어 들은 거 진짜
나서
대다 담아서 가르잖아 단다 그냥 하나 네 마음으로 지송라 네 숨자로라 대다 담아서 민다라 야 인도다 욕수님이 전담고 내셔서 대상황에서 지금 민지 중앙으로
나네
욕수님이 전담고 숨자 욕수님이 전담 단도 줘
나서
제대로 다 농대 장에 뒤숨기나네 방보고 도주다 이거 쪽수님이 전담 뭐 걸어 방보도 고자
나서
대단한 맛이 가르치나 내가 돈이 또겐지 남지 와라
나네
그 또왜 저 가래 돈이 걸어내 봐인자 대단한 맛이 되게
나서
그 또에 니되고 나 그게는 저는 니에
나네 나서
오 대상네 다대 담아 이거 셰기어 적소님이 담아 있나 다니 남신지 그거래
나서
아니 누가 숨은 거다 농대가 장네 농대가 숨어서 그게 나네 장아 잠시만
나서
용양 뭐 먹고 담고 가 어디 담아 인구시 시에네 어다 적소님이 담아 있나 딘데지 보고 그래
나서 겐디 이게 노르베 유텐 두파 ngapchunga yiden wone sine den dam number sum to do be den dam number sum to do
두반니 전당 number sum to de 되기도
den dam
카가 체인데 봐
아니
그다래 전당 시다 전
나서
톱당 포바 전 담바 코당
나서
두바 전 담바
나서
코당 number sum니 시나
나서
나서
저도
톱도 두번에 더 나왔습니다. 저도 내가 미카라 갈리게나. 저도 톱도 두번이 단문 남았어. 단문 니들라 미카라 파지에 단담 남았으면 돼.
나네.
미카라 저도 톱도 두번에 단담 남았어.
나네.
단담 세티.
난 막행에 따죠. 근데 we got a little question about the quotation. It might be spelled wrong, but he's gonna check it. In the meantime, I'll translate what he said. Okay. So we've got three different kinds of ultimate described here: ultimate object, ultimate goal, right, or ultimate achievement, and the ultimate practice, right? The book wants to. Jetsokapa in his gloss. Is that Jetsokapa or a commentary? The commentary to it says. Okay, the commentary to that book says. By the way. when we talk about the second sense of existing ultimately, we are talking about the first of the three. Okay? And Geshe-la wants to make very sure that you don't think that he's saying, or Jetsongkhapa is saying, that the second way of interpreting ultimate in the expression exist ultimately is all three of those. It's not. It's only the first of the three. Okay? So when we describe ultimate in the second sense of the word ultimate or existing ultimately, we're talking about only the first one. And in Tibetan, that's that one where you have the pun, right? The ultimate object. The ultimate, you can't describe it in English. Okay, dun dun dhamma means ultimate has the word dun in it, and object is the word dun here. So dun dun dhamma, where Geshe-la says, where we repeat in the Tibetan the word dun, okay, that's the one that we're talking about when we say the second interpretation of the meaning to exist ultimately, okay? And the book wants to be sure that you say that. Why do they call it the ultimate object? Because it is the object of the mind, the state of mind in which you perceive emptiness, okay? So that's why it's called emptiness. Rather than saying ultimate reality or something like that here, it says the ultimate object, meaning the ultimate object in the sense that this is the object of the ultimate state of mind, which is the direct perception of emptiness. Okay, the direct perception of emptiness. So that's why it's called, in this case, the ultimate object. Ultimate object, meaning ultimate reality, is the meaning here of the word ultimate in the expression existing as ultimate in its second sense, in its second context. Okay, so that's, he wants to make sure you understand that. No, sir. It is a printing error. 6th line from the bottom, at the very last syllable of the line, should be D-A-M, okay, dam, and not dung. Listen. Not again.
This one?
Line, yeah.
Haku dreba kuna, kenda di lungi mu di dreba charawa. Oku dreba kuna. Kiri uda dreba di ta chidang shamden male ngu chidang lo dang wan duksi. Uda di jin sham lo khana so. Ha udi dreba silep sona del sik silep sona lo yi ni ji sung yi pe chen chap lo.
Yin no yin
Di ka lo sung da.
Na so.
Ya di ka to dreba man ya udi dreba sa sha.
La le.
Ta le shi ni na la udi dreba si lo yi ni so.
That's it.
Udi deshe la sile ta deshe lo zhe den de ta di xiang jin chen ma ya xian da na zhan de.
That's it. When they talk about the commentary to the distinguishing the middle from the extremes, okay? When they talk about the commentary, Geshe-la wants to point out that in this particular book, Chang'en Lekshin Yimbo, the essence of eloquence on the art of interpretation, okay? Most often they'll be talking about Master Vasubandhu's commentary. Okay, so they won't identify the author all the time. They'll just say, in the commentary to distinguishing the middle from the extremes, then you have to think, oh, Master Vasubandhu's commentary. And then later he'll say, in the explanation, Del She, of the dividing the middle from the extremes, when you hear that, you have to think, oh, that's the one by Master Stiramati, okay, Lodutembo, okay? So when you hear those two code words, you know, for the most part, they're going to refer to those two authors. And he says, that's not true in general. I'm not saying in general, every time you come across the expression, the commentary to dividing the middle from the extremes, that it's talking about this particular commentary. But in this particular book by Jetsongkhapa, when he talks about the commentary, he's talking about Master Vasubandhu's. When he talks about the explanation, he's talking about Master Stiramati's. Okay? Although Stiramati's explanation isn't mentioned here, it comes a lot later.
Tishin te je, tishin te tong re je, tong re je, tishin re je, tong re je. Ta yita karse korasana, tamba ko sula sha korasana, tamba sena ta chokse.
Lare.
Jinda sula sha korasana, yishe ji nang ki chok tu chuba, shebe na lam, tanda yishe sele lam re, lam ji chok tu chuba. Ta lam ji nang chok chuba sana, 동이 우순도 동이 남다
나네.
이시에 담비 대인비셔로서도 동이 우순도 동이 람티기 니에때는 뭐마고래 또에 뭐마고 이비셔 대인비서 다 동이고 가서 동이 대 전담도 여시대 가르치기도 선 담발라 전담세 담바고 가르쳐 동이 원숭이 동인지 남고 향네 그 윤도 여스 그 조금이 전담세요 근데 지금 근데 조금이 전담세요
That's oh, this is going to be hard in English. Okay. We're on the fourth line from the bottom on page 55. So the commentary, right? Now we know who is, right? Master Vasubandhu's commentary to the text by Maitreya, really, written down by Master Sangha, right? It says, by the way, when we talk about ultimate here, in the expression existing as ultimate or existing ultimately, we are talking about the first one. Okay, the first one was as an object. Okay, and in Tibetan, don't forget that it means it breaks down to object, ultimate, right? Object, highest. The word ultimate in Tibetan is composed of two parts, dun, dam. Okay, dun means meaning or object, and dam means highest. Okay, so dun, dam, highest meaning is the Tibetan word for ultimate. So there's another meaning of dun that means object. Okay, so now there's a pun in Tibetan, it's dun, dun, dam, right? Which means the ultimate object, meaning that object of highest meaning. Okay, that object of highest meaning. Now he's going to play with the Tibetan words. Okay, Jetsukawa is going to play with the Tibetan words. He's saying, what are we talking about when we talk about the meaning of highest meaning, or the object of highest meaning? Right, ultimate object. The object of highest meaning refers to emptiness itself. Okay, why do we call it the object of highest meaning? What does ultimate mean? What does highest meaning mean? Well, the highest state of mind in the world is the direct perception of emptiness. Okay, that's the highest state of mind in the world, and so that's the meaning of the word highest. Okay, here it says yeshi, meaning wisdom, and Geshe-la points out that here the word wisdom means path. Okay, the highest path in the world, and don't forget that path in Buddhism means state of mind or spiritual realization. Okay, so the highest spiritual realization in the world is the direct perception of emptiness. And the dun here means the object of that state of mind. Okay, so you can describe the word ultimate as meaning the object of the highest state of mind. Object, highest. Okay, highest meaning. And in Tibetan that's a pun. Okay, so that dun, which is the object of the dampa state of mind, okay, is dun dampa, ultimate. And that's the meaning of the word ultimate in the expression exists as ultimate. In its second context, in its second connotation. Sorry, okay, and that's how he's explaining the meaning. Exist ultimately means exist as the object of the ultimate state of mind. Okay, that's all. That's all. Nine.
That is the Tony La. And I'm
Nine. So I'm going to ask you a question, okay? Ready? Emptiness itself can be described as ultimate reality. It could sometimes be nicknamed, sort of the ultimate, right? So when we say something exists ultimately, what are we talking about? Yeah. Yeah. I said in the second interpretation. I covered you, okay? Dundam dempar yobas. Dundam dendu yobas. When you say exists as the ultimate thing, what does the word exist refer to?
Appears to the mind receiving it as the ultimate.
We say, exists on top of the table, okay? It is on top of the table, okay? Exists on top of the table. And then you know what we're talking about. We're talking about where it exists, okay? When you say exists as ultimate or exists ultimately, where does it exist ultimately?
In the mind. Or no, it's a perception of the mind.
Huh?
It's a perception of the mind.
No, you do yes. You're getting real hot. Hot. You're getting closer and closer, but you're still a little bit away from it. Where does it exist? In Tibetan, Yusa, the place where it is. Right? Huh?
In the eye consciousness?
Mickey number 7 on the US. That's a little weird. Come on, you guys up in front here. Let's give us a place where it is. Where does it exist ultimately? Where is it that the ultimate exists then? When you say it exists ultimately, where are you saying it exists ultimately?
It exists in the object that's being misperceived as...
Don't forget the meaning of ultimate here. In the second sense of the meaning ultimate.
Well, the second is, it is, has to be in your mind stream.
No, it appears to
MindOnly,
you.
it's weird.
It exists in the object you perceive.
Well, at first it's the object.
Well, how about what state of mind is it that can establish that? Don't unsa to tope shepalayus. Don't unsa to topalayus. Topa unsa to tope ngor la yuna dun dampar yus dikapila. Yesterday everybody was nodding about it when I said it, and now you don't remember what you're nodding about. Last night. That was last night.
He's not looking to, I mean,
The state of mind
I'd
that
say that
perceiving
it
emptiness.
is Tentam Tenpa, but that's not what he's looking for.
Ko yosa sedi, ko yimadi dundan demadres. Nasa. Nari. Nasa. Okay. Don't forget that about what I'm asking, okay? For example, if I say, do you have some glasses? Do glasses exist in this room? You say, yeah, your glasses do exist in this room. And I say, where do they exist? Where is it that they exist? And you say, oh, they're existing on the table. Okay, there you have the distinction between what it is which is existing and where it is that that thing which exists is. Okay, so I'm trying to get at where is it that that thing that exists is. If you say, as Anton correctly identified, you know, what is it that we're talking about existing ultimately here? It is emptiness itself. Now, where is it that that emptiness exists? That's what I'm asking. Like the table, you know, where is it that the glasses are? It's on the table. Casa, don't you say casa kala Oh, you're saying it's on top of the table and it's on top of everything else too? I can't deny that emptiness exists everywhere, okay? Everything has its own emptiness. In that sense, you're right. Don't forget, though, where we're coming from. We're coming from somebody saying about emptiness that here is something that exists ultimately. Here is something that exists as the ultimate. Okay? From that point of view and from that angle, where is it that they say emptiness exists?
I want to ask you to
동시 관계 동바시요네. 맞아. When you ask that question, what object's emptiness are you talking about? He says, come on, get back to what the angle we're talking about. You guys aren't thinking of the angle that we're talking about. When you say, it does exist as the ultimate here, in this case, in this context, in this what we've been talking about here, what we've been reading about here, what are they trying to get at? What are they talking about? De topen loy ngor dun dam to yes. Come on, he already went through that. I said he was getting close, but he didn't get there, right? Now you're just giving me the same thing over again. That's exactly what Roy said a few minutes ago. So come on, don't go back to that. Yeah, he says we can buy it that way. Okay, the reason we can say that something exists as the ultimate, right, is that it exists to the ultimate state of mind. Okay, so it was really Roy. Okay, so we can say that something exists in this context, in this case, something exists as ultimate. Don't forget the quotation from Arya Sangha, right? Something exists as ultimate insofar as it exists as ultimate to the ultimate state of mind. Okay, that's all. Okay, that's what Dundam Dhamma means here. That's what Dundam means here, right? Remember we went to that object of the ultimate. Okay. That was the meaning of the quotation we just went over. Okay, that was Arya Sangha's quotation, right? Fourth line from the bottom, page 55. Didn't it say the object of the highest state of mind? Okay, the object of the highest path, we said, right? That state of mind can be described as a path, because path in Tibetan or in Buddhism means state of spiritual realization. So that object, which exists to the ultimate state of mind, is what we call the ultimate. Okay. Exists to the ultimate state of mind. Meaning, is that object which is located, Geshe-la kept saying, by the ultimate state of mind.
But not
Okay.
in
Not in per se. Ngor means to that state of mind, which presents itself to that state of mind. Okay, it's a very difficult word in Tibetan. Right. Geshe-la wants to say dun, which means object, right? He wants to say nyedun. Nyedun means the object which that state of mind establishes, or the object which that state of mind locates. Okay, is ultimate, and that's what makes it ultimate, because the word ultimate in Tibetan means the object of the highest. Okay, meaning the highest state of mind, meaning the direct possession of emptiness. Okay, that's again. So, Dr. Chilton, when I asked you where is emptiness, and you said everywhere, right? And I said, no, in this context, okay? When we say it exists as the ultimate object, then what are we talking about?
It exists as the ultimate object in relation to the subject, which is the ultimate state of mind.
Quran dundambe yures, then dundambe yuchengi want to change it in the Shabres. Okay, you got it right. It is the object of the ultimate state of mind. But what is the object of the ultimate state of mind? What is the ultimate object?
What is the ultimate object?
Domini is.
The absence of the gotcha.
Domini is.
No.
The yuchen digi yukari is in it, domini is. Listen. I made a mistake in translation, okay? What is the subject which holds that object?
You posit it the other way. It's that, it's the subject which has as its object that which is path of purification. You could say.
Namda lang mi patatu is. Namda lam ra is. Namda lam. Good. I like it. Okay, you said the path of purity, which we know is a code word for the direct perception of emptiness. So right. You got it, okay? Then we have to say that if you describe it as the object of the path of purity, the ultimate object of the path of purity, and then you have to say path of purity meaning direct perception of emptiness, then you can describe this object as that object which is perceived by the direct perception of emptiness. I like it. Okay. That's okay. So, we can summarize by saying, when people come up to you on the street and say, hey, Robert Chilton, where is it that the thing that is said to exist ultimately, in the second interpretation of what it means to exist ultimately, where is it that that ultimate exists? And, because people are going to come up to you and say, where is the eyeglasses? The eyeglasses are on the table. People are going to come up to you and say, where is Geshe Rinchen? He's sitting in his house. Okay, Robert Chilton, where is it that the ultimate, in its connotation, in the second connotation, the second interpretation of it, where is it that that ultimate is?
It's in the place, it's in the perception of the ultimate state of mind.
Yeshi dumping warness. Yeah, good. Because it would be a little uncomfortable if you said again, oh, it's everywhere. Emptiness is everywhere. That's it.
What I did, you start with so much. You start to you sometimes.
That's it.
Citizen, you start to you
Therefore, I want you to be sensitive to this distinction between the thing which is there and the place where the thing which is there is. Okay, so I want you to be clear on that. One refers to the object which exists. The other exists to, like the place where it's sitting or something like that. We're not talking about a literal place where it's sitting now, right now, but I want you to be clear in your mind. When we say a thing exists, you have to have clear in your mind not only the thing which is said to exist, but the locale where it is said to exist. Okay, which in this case is to the ultimate state of mind. Okay.
한반이 담보고 세다 유사고 유사고 한반이 상매기 냠샤 이시라 제네 다 유사
나서
비 되데 다 되세나 유르스기
나서
임베 담비 되는 도슬라나들 담발람나 나서 다 유예지다 유사지니
나서 So page 55, third line from the bottom, Jetsun Kappa himself uses this very useful distinction between what is there and where it is that what is there is located. Where it is that what is there is located. Okay, he uses that distinction very effectively here in explaining to you the literal meaning of the word dundam, because he says in the third line from the bottom, Dabani, the highest, is that deep state of meditative wisdom which is immaculate, meaning direct perception of emptiness. Somebody stop. No. Okay, sorry. So, ultimate or highest, the dampa in dundampa, right? In the word ultimate, the half of it refers to that highest state of mind, meaning the deep meditative wisdom, which is immaculate, meaning the direct perception of emptiness. Okay, and to be that thing's object, that dampa's dun, right, is what it is to be. And then it says the word object, yul, okay, is what it means to be the ultimate object, or you could say ultimate. Okay, in Tibetan it's that object, dun, is the object of the ultimate state of, is the object of the highest state of mind, dampa, so we can call it dampe dun, meaning dundam, which is the Tibetan word for ultimate. Okay, so that's how it's coming here. Okay. Okay.
유인배 담비터는 전담을 시했소만이 다 대수는 대수투사 다 수라서 우투고 담비 되는데 니가 다들 디디 가도 담비 되잖아. 면도 단담고 수 샤고도 있잖아. 다음에 비ten 귀신이 니콜라 시큐레.
나서.
괜히 있다. 괜히 근데 똥이 괜히. 남다람비 미비 전담양 이노 남다람비 미비 전담고 차버잖아. 왜 그렇다? 왜 사고 남다를 남비체? 그 요리 인다 그 요야.
So, last line of page 55. Having described what it is that is ultimate, having described what the word ultimate means, hey, can we put our finger now and say, hey, this is what they're talking about? Last line, page 55. Yeah, we'll tell you what we're talking about. Dog may be done. Okay? Emptiness itself. That thing which is the absence of a self-nature. Okay? That thing which is the very nature of things. That thing which is the absence of a self-nature. That thing which is the ultimate object of the path of purity. Now they've used that code word for direct perception of emptiness. That thing which is the object of the path of purity, that emptiness, oh, that's what we're talking about. In the second interpretation of the expression to exist as the ultimate, okay, or ultimately, is what ultimate means here.
라디오는 지수와 텔라니 스타콜 텔니 텔라니 요에 텔라니 뭐니 셴니 메기스 군다다 셴와니 텔라 프로사요
나서
용도 찍고도 그래서 고소 숨기나
나서 And by the way, I forgot to translate one thing. He said, by the way, path of purity is again specifying the locale. Okay? Meaning it's ultimate in that it is the ultimate thing to the path of purity, right? And that was his last phrase on page 55. So that's again, he said, Geshe-la said, pointing out the locale. Now he goes on to page 56, first line. In the Tibetan it says, Terni. This is a special grammar particle in Tibetan, which means, now what could be that thing? Okay, Deruni means, what could be that thing? Well, I'll tell you what. It could not, it's not the other two kinds of a nature. Okay, it's not the other two kinds of nature. Meaning what? We're not talking about Shenwangs and Kuntaks. Okay? What could be that ultimate thing? What could exist as the ultimate? What could be ultimate reality? Well, I'll start out by saying, I'll tell you something that could not be that thing, and that's dependent things and constructs. Two of the attributes of the mind-only school. Oh, but rather, it can only be one thing. Jigbu means it can only be one thing and one thing alone, and that's totality. Okay, that's emptiness in the mind-only school, and that's what it can be. That's what the text is saying, says Jetsun Kappa. What he's saying is that we're describing here something which has that quality. And in Tibetan, that's the verb yipa. Okay, something which has that quality. And in Tibetan, that's as opposed to the word yimba, which means to be. In English, you say is for both. It is on the table means it exists on the table. It is this, or it is not this, is referring to a different kind of isness, which is it is that thing or it is not that thing. And throughout this section, when they keep saying meaning it exists as ultimate, it exists as ultimate, it exists ultimately, they're saying it is the ultimate. And that's, I think, where Dr. Chilton was having some, we had a question about it, we were talking. Just when you say this exists ultimately, what you are saying in this second interpretation is that it exists as something ultimate. And in effect what you're saying is, it is the ultimate. You see what I mean? So then you get the distinction in the Tibetan between the word exists and the word is. Okay, so we go from exists ultimately to exist as the ultimate to it is ultimate reality. Okay, it is the ultimate. Okay, and that's the second sense of ultimate here. Okay, you have to think of it that way, as a verb of identification, and not so much as a verb of existence. Okay, that's what
타고 이미 군들라 의다이 로도 장아 남자 주요나 미치고는 지금 내가 농도 제 중요해요. 다시 산이 시죠.
No, sir. We're going to go on tomorrow to the second line here, where Master Sanghas, I'm sorry, Maitreya's text, dividing the middle from the extremes, is going to go on, he's going to be quoting it as proof for his statement that out of the three attributes of the mind-only school, it is only totality or emptiness which can be described in this manner, in the second interpretation. Okay? Sangye Shindu Mikde Wagi Dokunam Dashina Chapasho Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatyami Digewokun Sonam Yeshe Tozokshi Sonam Yeshe Lechunghe Damba Kuni Tobaisho. Sounds like getting to do it. Oh, sorry.